where we're discussing the financial planning process and what you should expect when engaging with a financial planner. Still with me in studio is Warren Ingram, Director of Galileo Capital, and John Campbell, Director of Chartered Wealth Solutions. Gentlemen, we closed off the last half really looking at, once we've got all the information that's required to do the financial planning, now really it's around unpacking what financial decisions are available to us. John, you started picking up on the types of strategies or the scenario planning that one can do. I mean, this is something that, to my mind, is critical in getting right. If we're going to allow clients to, or make it available to clients to have those decisions available to them, we need to educate them in some way. What type of education processes needs to take place here?
I think if you're talking about investments, for example, the investor or the client needs to understand what risk is all about. So this is where the risk conversation really starts. You need to explain to somebody, if you're going to have half your money in shares, what does that mean in a good year and what does it mean in a bad year? How much money can you really lose? And then what do you expect over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, given the history of stock markets? So this is a real educational phase for somebody. They need to understand what kind of money they can draw from their investments. They need to understand the impact that those drawings will have. So this is the time where you give those sort of parameters to an investor to make them understand what's going on. I guess the same for life cover and all the other kind of risk assets, is just to understand what it really means when they start buying these products. Now is the time for them to really almost test drive the way that they would do, well, how they would use their money.
Mm-hmm. You spoke again about the discussion of risk coming through, and again we focus primarily on market risk, which is really volatility and how much the equities are going to go up or down in any given year. There are a number of other sort of risks that come into it. And John, if I had to turn to you and say, well, if you put all your money in cash, that would be a very, very risky move. Why would that be?
Well, I consider it to be recklessly conservative. And also, once again, we're looking at creating wealth, whereas generally, if you look at after tax, once your interest has been taxed, you would be getting a return of less than inflation, which means you're losing money every year. So we try and avoid putting all your money in cash, although cash as an asset class certainly has a place in a portfolio.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that really it's balancing the risk. So we spoke about market risk. You've now brought up the aspect of inflation risk. There's concentration risk, and everyone talks about having all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And I think the last one is really longevity, which links to inflation. One might put all the money in cash but find it running out 10 years' time. That's a serious risk, and it's got to be factored in somewhere in the process.
And I think many clients use the life expectancy tables to work out their retirement on, which for a male is currently 78 years of age. I think you find that most people live beyond that age now. So it's no longer a sensible thing to use in terms of your planning. But once again, you need to look at your health. All those kind of factors come into the equation. And maybe consider planning. When we plan for retirement, we're talking 100. Let's plan to 100 as a safety blanket. That's where you want to plan to, and then if your money runs out around that time, hopefully you shouldn't be around any longer.
You talk from a retirement perspective, planning to the age of 100 or even 110 for that matter is probably a prudent way to go. But the idea of retirement is changing dramatically. When do we actually put in and say, well, when do we retire from? Because some people aren't formally retiring the way they're used to. How has it changed the planning process?
Well, I think, if you had to take it back 20 or 30 years, people would plan to retire at 65, and typically they would have passed away by the time they're 67, 68. So, and then retirement was real. They literally stopped working and they didn't think about it again. Today, I think retirement is simply a line in the sand. You would say, at this point, I would like to be financially free. I would like to carry on working, but not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because from here, I feel like doing something completely different, and if I can generate some income from that, well, that's great. But because people are living longer, if you retire at 55 and you die at 100, that's almost half your life that you're retired in a way. So typically retirement is simply your second or your third career. It's something that you do, and you keep yourself occupied, but you would like to be at a point financially where you're working for fun. And that's really what retirement is nowadays. It's not stopping work altogether.
So it's about gaining financial independence as opposed to stopping work.
Absolutely,
like you mentioned.
And I think that's the point. Is particularly nowadays, when you are 55 or 60, there's pressure in the corporate workspace to stop working because they need more younger people coming into the corporate world. But that doesn't mean that somebody like that doesn't have enormous value. So typically, you find them now becoming executive coaches or consultants or helping small businesses, and they're still generating an income, and they are extremely valuable. But they don't need that income every single day.
I think many people don't have the choice, sadly. you reach retirement age in your retirement fund and you are retired. And if you've worked in a corporate environment for 30 or 40 years, it's quite hard to pick up and start finding a new career and keeping yourself occupied. So in many cases where we have clients coming through the door, they haven't had a choice. They've hit the age of 60, it's a retirement age in their fund, and they have to retire. And I think the point is, I think all the marketing around retirement is around, will you have enough money to retire? And I think that's, but no one looks at life in retirement. We focus quite strongly, what are you going to do in retirement? What are you retiring to, as opposed to retiring from? And I think that's very difficult. I certainly find that the guys involved in the corporate world struggle a lot more with that, because they've never had, they don't have the choice. Whereas an entrepreneur can say, well, actually, I'll carry on for another 5 or 10 years. Well, I can involve someone in my business, I can earn a little bit less, and pay them and carry on going. So I think you have more choices as an entrepreneur. And we certainly encourage living life in retirement.
Yeah, and speaking along these lines as well, I mean, coming back to what you said is, when sitting down with a financial planning tool, that financial planning tool is not just to spit out an answer, it's there to facilitate a conversation and empower the client with, these are the sets of financial decisions that are available to you. Which do you want to start with first? Which then begs the next question is, who actually owns that financial plan at the end of the day? Is it that you that own it, or the client that should be owning that?
Well, I mean, it's 100% the clients. I mean, the advisor is there to help you and help you make good decisions. So typically that's your financial director, but you're still the CEO. You're still the person that, if the plan goes wrong, I mean, the financial director will feel bad, but you'll suffer. I mean, you'll be the one that doesn't have the money. So if you're a client, you use your financial planner as a guiding light, but it's certainly not somebody that you just hand over responsibility and say, you make it happen and I'll just take the money, because ultimately you are the one that has to carry the can.
So we finished the strategy stage, and we said we've actually now come up with a plan, and we know between ourselves and the client exactly where it is that we need to go. Now it comes the first step, and that's really implementing that plan. Okay, and that's probably where we spoke about earlier. If there's a product to be sold, so to speak, or financial solution to be met, that's the point that it's really going to happen, where you might be putting risk policies in place, you might be taking out extra investments, or you might be then moving that from a pre-retirement place to post-retirement place. I think what we need to look at there really is from once somebody implements, what are the type of things, because it can't just be a product, it could be really around settling a bond or doing something else. What are the broad areas that people are focusing on at this stage?
Well, I think if you look at when it comes to implementing, there's probably been 10 recommendations made, and one needs to consider now which ones are we going to implement. In many cases, clients can't implement all 10 recommendations. They can't afford to. But certainly, obviously, we look at settling debt as first and foremost. It often makes a lot more sense to settle debt than start investing money. So what we do is we try and encourage the client to settle debt, and maybe put a plan together to help them settle the debt quicker than they had planned to. And then look at investing money.
So again, it's not just about selling a financial solution. It could be about taking.
But then on the other hand, you get a situation where a client now has R1 million to invest. Where do we go? Who do we invest it with, and why? We have those kind of discussions. And the same thing is, your plan might have said you need 2 million in life cover. Which company do you go to? Who do we use for that? Who has? It's another whole meeting in itself. That.
Sure, absolutely. We've implemented the plan. Okay. Now we sit and we potentially don't talk to each other for a few months or perhaps even a year. But then the sixth step in the process, which to my mind is the most critical, and that's the reviewing and monitoring of that plan. I mean, to your mind, why is this aspect, for the benefit of viewers, why is this aspect so critical?
Once again, I think it's something that's neglected. Probably the most neglected part of financial planning is the ongoing reviewing process. And I think that's, I mean, life is not defined. Every day is a new day. So one goes through many transitions in their life. You have a child, you buy a house, you buy a new car, you start a new job, and so it goes. So that can happen at any point in your life. So one needs to sit down and say, well, okay, how's your plan on today? But if something happens in 2 weeks' time, how's that going to affect your plan? And you need to sit down and to relook at it, strategize again, and so it goes. So once again, we would encourage at least an annual review. In many cases, things change faster than that. And when you're going through a transition, we encourage sitting down, having a meeting, discussing what effects it has on your financial situation.
Warren, John picked up on, I mean, basically the personal changes that happens in one's life and how it impacts from a financial point of view. But there's a number of other factors that come into it, and I think most importantly, economic, political, and even from a market perspective. What are the types of considerations people should be taking, given what we've gone through in the last year or even 2 years?
Well, I think I mean if you're an investor, particularly a retired investor, where you can't really be saving money nowadays, you'd be worried now about whether your capital is still at its values before the crisis arrived. What should you be doing in terms of the way you're drawing from your capital? So those are big questions that are facing particularly the retired or close to retired investor now, because they're just not sure whether these great plans that they might have developed 5 years ago or 4 years ago are still on track. So typically now would be the time almost to redo your plan from scratch, to say, well, these are the circumstances now, these are my assets now, and this is what the world looks like now, and how does my plan fit into that? Or should I change my plan completely? Or more than likely, often what happens is the temptation is to change everything because the markets have changed. But what you might find is that actually your plan is fine, and that you just need to stick to the plan and maybe develop faith again that your plan that you had 3 or 4 years ago is fine. But it's a good time. I mean, these reviews are a great time to do a checkup, to make sure and touch base again, remind yourself, if you're the investor, why you made these decisions, why things are the way they are, and then just stick to the plan, because that's usually the point. Is a good review is something that helps you redevelop your faith or rediscover your faith in your plan, and make sure that you stick to it, as if you were going to gym. I mean, you need a personal trainer every now and then just to keep you on track and say, you slacking here, and stick to it again. And that's what these reviews are all about.
So it's making sure that sort of you're staying on the same track, and every time you start going slightly off, it's a reevaluation, and it's perhaps a small rebalance, whatever that might be for the individual on that side.
I think once again, I mean, there's a huge amount of educating clients that goes on. I sort of found certainly January, February last year, when the market was near its bottom, I mean, most of the time we're sitting with clients, educating them that this has happened before. It's not. I mean, it was a sort of freak event, but we've had it before. And trying to counsel them through it and encourage them to stick to their long-term strategy. Once again, when we develop the strategies, it's not about your plan for the next year. We've developed an investment strategy for you that's sort of for life, and it's to stick to it. And it's very easy to be swayed by by reading the papers and watching the media and that kind of thing, and losing track of where you are. And that's where our job once again comes back. We're the guide. We sit there, we hold your hand, and we take you through the good and the bad times.
Okay, so again, about creating that perspective, creating that peace of mind, and hopefully creating some sense of what one can expect going into the future. John Campbell, Warren Ingram, thank you so much for coming through tonight. I've certainly enjoyed the discussion, and I think the viewers have certainly got something very valuable out of it tonight.